What's up guys, it's Ryan and Eric from Tower Reviews, and today we're going to be comparing the two big 7-inch tablets on the market right now. We got one over here from Android, the Nexus 7 made by Asus by Google, and we got Apple's iPad mini just released yesterday actually. So we've got iOS 6 and Android 4.1.2 Jelly Bean respectively. So we're going to start out the video by going over each's hardware, and then we're going to do some benchmarks and boot up tests. So we're going to start out by taking a look at the Nexus 7, which is somewhat of an older tablet. It came out, I believe it was released in June, so it's sort of a relatively cheaper design as the product itself is cheaper, starting at $200 for 16 gigabytes, going up to $250 for the 32 gigabyte, and then add on an additional $50 for data. If we look around the device, you'll see that we've got a plastic textured design on the back with the Nexus and Asus branding and a speaker across the bottom. On the left side there's nothing. On the right side you got a volume rocker, power button, top nothing, bottom micro USB, 3.5mm headphone jack. The front you have the singular camera, which is just a 1.2 megapixel front facing VGA camera. It's not very impressive, I never use it. And then here you have Android 4.1.2 Jelly Bean, as I said, with Project Butter and all that good stuff. It's 7.82 inches in height, 4.72 inches in width, 0.41 inches in thickness. It weighs 0.75 pounds, very light, easy to hold in one hand, and it comes in one color, which is black. We got the 7-inch display, thus the name Nexus 7, with 1280 by 800 resolution, which is 216 pixels per inch, which is not quite as good as some of Apple's Retina displays, but it is very hard to distinguish individual pixels when you bring it up close. So let's do that now, and you'll get a little preview maybe of what it looks like. It's a very nice display. So we've got the quad-core Tegra 3, which is made by NVIDIA, and it is 1.3 gigahertz. We've got 1 gigabyte of RAM. Pretty top of the line specs here. Not really lacking much except for a rear facing camera.
Okay, so looking at the iPad mini, it's clear that it's a little bit of a bigger device. Just the fact that it's the 7.9-inch display compared to the 7-inch gives it a little bit of an advantage in that field. When you look at it head on, you can see you have the 7.9-inch display. On the top, you have the microphone in the center and the power button on the right side, as well as the headphone jack on the left side. On the right here you have a volume rocker and the toggle that can either act as the mute switch or the rotation lock. That's available to be changed in the software settings. On the bottom you have the dual stereo speaker grills as well as the lightning connector, and on the left side you have nothing. On the front there's a 1.2 megapixel 720p recording front-facing FaceTime camera, which is great for self-portraits and video conferencing, just because it gives you a little bit higher quality. And on the back you have an aluminum finish with the 5 megapixel iSight camera, 1080p video recording, which is very nice for your standard everyday video recording and still image capturing. Alright, so getting more into the internal specs of this device, we have the height of 7.87 inches and a width of 5.3 inches, as well as a thickness of 0.28 inches, 0.68 pounds. 7.9-inch LED backlit multi-touch IPS display, 1024 by 768 resolution, and we have 163 pixels per inch. It's a little bit worse than the Nexus. It's clearly not as sharp in closer proximity, but when you look at it from a distance, it looks pretty damn good. Inside, we're rocking the A5 chip, which is kind of a disappointment in my opinion, but it does the job. It's equivalent to the iPod 5th generation as well as the iPhone 4S processor, and it has 512 megabytes of RAM. Has all of the good Bluetooth, the dual band Wi-Fi antennas, so that's pretty much what the iPad mini is in its entirety. And we're going to go ahead and power down the devices now. So we're going to shut them down at this time. Go.
Okay, so they're both going down now?
Alright, so the iPad's almost immediately off. You might have not even been able to catch how fast it went, but it's off. And the Nexus is still working. Okay, so iPad came up first. It's ready to go. No lag. Shaboom. Everything's good to go. The Nexus is got a nice little animation, but it's taking forever. Alright, so the Nexus exhibits a little bit of lag when it starts up, and also its widgets aren't fully loaded, so it's not really ready for complete browsing experience yet.
Alright, so we're going to start out here in the operating systems by doing a benchmark test and see which one wins. So that'll be comparing their internals.
Alright, so the iPad was a little bit behind.
And this is a portrait only application, so
It's not really much to see visually, we're just going to be able to give you the numbers.
okay, so the iPad mini's done, and so is the Nexus. We've got a score of 1274 on the Nexus 7 and a score of 753 on the iPad mini. The Nexus 7 usually doubles the score of the iPad, so it's a little bit off this time. Let's say go to our YouTube channel.
Here we go. Whoa.
Okay, so the Nexus seemed to have it instantly up, and it wasn't even in the history.
Alright, here we go.
Alright, so they were pretty even that time. iPad's still going. It's done now.
It seems that the Nexus is, I don't know, just loading things up a lot faster. It decides to load all the content before showing it, when the iPad will show what it has loaded immediately, at least for this website. The browsing experience is a little bit better on the iPad. It's a little more fluid.
Definitely.
Actually,
text actually looks a lot crisper on the iPad. I'm not sure why.
So
it's just the wider screen gives you so much more real estate. You wouldn't think those couple of inches would make such a difference.
It's only 1 inch, but it really does pushes it over the top to make it a way better experience. Also, you see on the iPad when you scroll in and out, you're seeing no lag. On the Nexus, you're seeing a little bit of lag.
That's web browsing. I'd say they're pretty even. Nexus loads things faster, but the iPad is better once you're actually at the place you want to be. So here in the operating system, they're all pretty even. They offer much of the same features. You have more selection of optimized apps for the iPad. There may be more apps in the Android market, but they're a lot more optimized specifically for the iPad mini because the apps that worked with the iPad 2 are transferred right over since they have the same screen resolution. So I'd say the app selection is better on the iPad mini. I was able to find more games that I like to play. So we're just going to do an example of a game that I have on both, which is Dead Trigger. Just see which one loads up and plays smoother. Okay.
Alright, so as you can see, the iPad gets right to it, but the Nexus seems to be pulling ahead a little bit.
Okay, so we're ready to go on the iPad. Colors look a little bit richer on the Nexus 7. You can also see with the 16:9 aspect ratio, the content fills up the entire screen, which is one thing that I'm not totally in favor of on the iPad, but I'd say that getting the extra screen real estate is more of a benefit in a lot more situations. So I'm still gonna have to. I still prefer the iPad mini screen size, even though it's not 16:9.
Also, the iPad mini has a physical home button, and the Nexus 7 has it's integrated into the software, the navigational buttons, so it cuts down on your screen resolution a little bit, or screen real estate a little bit. But we're seeing some lag from the Nexus. We're about to die. I don't really know how to play this.
Overall, they're about the same experience. You may see experience a little bit more lag on the Nexus 7, but once it gets going, they're pretty much dead on even. Alright, so one other big point of contention between these two tablets is the voice assistants. You got Google Now on the Nexus 7 and Siri on the iPad mini. which obviously is like Siri on any other device, so we're not going to go into that. Google Now offers a little bit more, as it has this card layout that automatically show up, and it gives you recommendations based on your location, gives you information relative to yourself, like distance to home.
It basically learns where you live and what your interests are, and gives you information to pertain to that.
Where Siri really has no predictive ability, it's based completely off of what you're asking at the time being. Right now, I'd still prefer Siri to ask questions and do tasks just because it works better and it's more consistent. Who won the Sixers game?
Philadelphia defeated Denver by a score of 84-75 last Wednesday.
Okay, so Google Now didn't even get my search right. It said who won the second game, and it searched Google. Usually it would bring up a card such as this, which is more visually appealing. It doesn't have all the functionality that Siri has. It has the sports and weather and such, but it doesn't really do many system commands such as setting reminders and things of that nature. Overall, I'd still hand it to Siri, but I think there's a lot more potential in what Google's doing right now. Granted, Apple could still update what they have with Siri and make it better with more predictive technology, but for the time being, that's how I feel about it. Have the ability to rotate in landscape, which the Nexus 7, that's pretty new to it in the newest version of Jelly Bean.
Which I honestly think is a nice feature to have.
However, the way they execute it isn't exactly the most appealing. They just kind of throw the search bar over to the side and put a line down, and then the dock is to the side. I don't know. It looks more like the portrait in the landscape on the iPad. I don't want to make it too much about the software. Obviously, everyone knows the differences between Android and iOS, and that really comes down to preference. If you have a lot of other Apple devices, I definitely go with the iPad because the ecosystem just syncs well. Apps you buy on your iPhone will work with the iPad. If you set a reminder on your iPad, it'll show up on your Mac. Just everything works pretty much flawlessly. But if you're just someone who prefers customizability and the ability to do with your tablet what you truly wish to do, I'd recommend the Nexus 7. And also it comes in at a price point $130 cheaper for the same storage. So that's another thing to consider.